Fintech Chatter, the conversations fintech leaders actually listen to, presented by Tier 1 People, Executive Search for Fintech.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Chatter. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search firm that for the past decade has been helping businesses like today's guest identify that 1% who redefine what's possible. Today's guests are Sam Everington and Mark Bernhardi of Engine Starling. Guys, welcome and thank you for hosting me at the World Credit Union Conference.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good morning, Dexter. Good to be here.
Yeah, what a backdrop. Ariane couldn't have branded this better.
Our first ever conference started as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. It's great to be doing this with you at the event. Sam, maybe if you tell us a little bit about yourself and Engine by Starling.
Yeah, so career software developer, but I joined Starling 10 years ago now, back as a 20-person startup. So pre-bank and banking license to build out the product and technology that eventually let Starling launch in 2017 and have the impact it's had in customers now. 4.5 million customers in the UK, 500,000 businesses, a 9% market share in business banking, which is an incredible land grab effectively from the incumbents in that time. So that's the kind of genesis of Engine and the business that we evolved. And then for the last 4 years, we separated Engine, the technology company, out into a separate business and have been using that as the vehicle to partner with established banks in other markets to bring Starling's product and technology know-how effectively and the systems we built to enable these outcomes for customers and bring that in partnership with the things that are hard to scale yourself, the brand, the license, the trust, the credit risk and market knowledge and understanding. And together we think we can have a much bigger impact much more quickly.
And Mark, what's your role at Engine?
Well, Stan brought me on to lead our growth in Australia and New Zealand. So I first came across the Engine brand when AMP announced it go live, and I was really impressed to get a bank live in 12 months, something that's going to get your attention. And then quickly after that, Engine announced their partnership with SBS Bank. And I'd really drawn to the speed at which Engine was delivering change and also getting to those outcomes that I think you and I have heard so many more stories.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to core migration. So the ability to get AMP live within 12 months, start that partnership and collaboration with SBS Bank, that was something I thought was really interested and sort of got me sort of looking into Engine and wanting to learn more. And now I'm part of the team. I'm looking forward to getting some more partnerships in our region and growing the business.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Yep. But Sam, super interested in your kind of backstory because you started out building the tech for Starling. Do you want to talk us? Do you want to talk us through that journey that you've been on in the neo-banking space and what it was like to be that early and one of the most successful neobanks on the planet?
Yeah, there was a real buzz around fintech in the UK at the time. I worked for a software vendor before my career. Started as a mainframe developer, spent my life replacing leasing and lending systems in banks and auto manufacturers. So mostly gnarly, big transformation programs. And Starling was a real opportunity to kind of start from scratch, as some people would look at it, but really to build inside the business that was going to use it rather than the other side of RFP processes and requirements documents and change requests and that kind of thing. And that's the difference to me. We were sat in one building effectively with the bankers, with the product owners, with the operations teams from frontline customer support to card ops, payments ops, financial crime teams, deeply embedded with engineering in a way that you can never do in any normal commercial relationship. And so every day we get feedback from customers, feedback from staff, and we can act on it, iterate, give something a try, see how it works, adjust it, because the first version of anything you design is imperfect, inevitably. You don't know what you want, and the users fundamentally don't know what they want either. And we could really shorten that feedback loop and quickly adjust, work out what matters, what didn't matter, and bring that to life as quickly as possible. Both, yes, for the benefit of customers, but actually the biggest difference is the benefit of the employees.
Yeah.
And that's what so many companies fail to appreciate, that if you build the right systems and support your employees to enjoy their jobs and be good at their jobs, they then go on to give better service, to deliver better outcomes for customers. And that really comes through in the experience of Starling's customers in the world around and the position we've managed to achieve in the market.
What was it like being able to build though with minimal resources, startup? We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the technology kind of still wasn't quite there to build on the vision.
It was tough. And we had a quite an experienced team. We all came out of financial technology companies and that kind of thing. So we had a better idea than a lot of fintechs what it was going to take to get this done, but no appreciation for the sheer scope of systems you needed to build and develop to really, really run a full service checking, savings, lending operation as an organization. Had we known what we were taking on, I'm not sure we would have embarked on that journey at all. And you see that in the market now with a few vendors trying to build things that look a bit like Engine, and the capital expense, the sheer burn that's necessary to get there, and big banks, tier ones, still going down the path of trying to build it all themselves, and the budgets that they're writing to do that are astronomical. They say it's a big undertaking. Banks are complex organizations, and a lot of technology is needed.
So, Mark, you got a really varied background at Atlassian, nCino. Now you're at Engine by Starling. What has that kind of given you in terms of an understanding as to the challenges that we've got here specifically in Australia, especially when it comes to core banking technology?
Yeah, I spent my career before that in banking. So I'd actually been on the transformation side as well, trying to ingest a lot of this technology. And as I sort of traversed into Atlassian and nCino now with Engine, what I've really grown an appreciation for, and what's continued to draw me, is the speed at which we're able to make those changes. But I think more importantly, with Engine, we have bankers within the organization that have a first appreciation for the risk and the compliance environment in which we need to build. But banks are not immune to change. We still have to help our banks take on that change. And so that ability to bring risk and compliance into how we deliver that change, I think, is fundamentally what makes us different to some of the other generic software providers out there. But it's exciting. I think the market is uniquely primed at the moment for the smaller community banks to sort of tap into that technology. And I really like the way that Sam described it. I think what's unique about where Engine came from within Starling Bank, the software was built for a specific purpose. Starling didn't go to market and bring a software in and say, well, how do we now define our operations to align with the software? They said, let's build that operational model, that customer-centric model, and then make the software fit around that. And I think that's the proposition we're bringing to our market today.
One of the challenges, I think, it has always been here in the mutual space and credit unions. I look at some of my clients who are mutual banks or customer-owned banks, and their assets that they've got on the balance sheet wouldn't even equate to the annual technology spend of a CBA. How have you built something that not only can you implement within 12 months, but that these types of businesses can actually afford to use and to implement?
Well, I think the budget of CBA probably dwarfs our own market capitalization, never mind the spend that community banks have access to. I think the principles of which cloud software is now being built is very much usage-based. It's making sure that it's open through APIs, it's modular, that consumers and community banks can actually adapt to it quickly. That's the key difference I'm seeing through modern capability versus the legacy software. Legacy software was built very much as a closed ecosystem to basically have all their services packed into it. Modern technology is built as an open ecosystem, one that banks can access the data, that own the data, but they can also bring some of their other partnerships into the ecosystem to plug some of those capabilities and provide a full end-to-end experience for their customers.
Yeah. And what have you found with that, Sam, from a fintech community perspective? I remember being here in 2018 when Cybus was here. And one of the things that really struck me was with APIs, it was almost like we could have a Stone and Chalk, which is our fintech hub, but in the cloud.
Yeah.
We've not quite got to that point. The promise of CDR and open banking hasn't quite kind of got the traction here in Oz that we hoped it would. So what are you seeing from a partnerships perspective and a kind of this ecosystem of different solutions that you can bring in for your customers? Is that something that you've been able to do with Engine?
Yeah, there's kind of two different perspectives of it. There's the consulting plan of the last 5 or 10 years of composable banking, where you bring 30 different vendors, best of breeds together. And that's been the kind of model that's pitched to banks as the future. And the reality of those that have gone down that path is the integration effort is just too complex and too capital intensive. To your budget question, that's a tens of hundreds of millions of dollars program just to integrate the components to get to a basic foundation of a savings product, let alone a checking product, a richer lending product. And so you don't need to choose that many different vendors in an ecosystem. It's not an efficient way to deliver most of it. You just need something that works. And then you hero the few things that are your differentiator as an organization. 90% of all banks are the same product, same servicing, the same P&L. The 10, 20% around the edge is where the differentiation comes. And you need a technology system that's flexible enough to enable those differentiators easily. Everything with APIs and events in the world we're moving to, so you can plug in those ecosystem partners and deliver real value and a real differentiation for customers, but not to an extent where you have to make choices on 5 different payment gateways and different CRMs and different fin crime and case management tools, down to who handles the telephony lines and that kind of thing. You could do that, but there's no need to manage it to that extent. And that's where Engine really helps, because we've got a good answer out of the box for each of those. Starling's optimized the journeys on, optimized the employee experience over years. And that's fundamentally how we can do it in under 12 months. We are turning on a running bank from all the back-end systems to the employee interface and to the SDKs, to the customer journeys that enable that. And so the year's implementation program isn't technology wiring up systems and doing basic testing. It's a year of differentiating proposition work and a few key integrations that hero those differences. So.
Yeah. We've all heard the term that touching the core is the career killer of a banking CEO.
A job best left for your success.
Exactly. Yeah. We talked about the cost implications and challenges, but how have you overcome, the push against the risk element of touching technology?
Yeah. Everyone goes into businesses wanting to make a difference, wanting to make an impact, but they don't want to do it at the expense of their own track record, their own reputation ultimately. And the problem with big core programs is when you're writing a business case and the value comes in year 4, year 5, that's the tenure of an average executive. And so you're writing a business case where you take all of the risk and your successor gets all of the upside. And that's pretty difficult to contemplate and sign off. And so what we've really focused on is getting the growth, the value into the business case much, much quicker than that. If you can get the business growing in a new customer segment, expanding in market in under 12 months or something first, and then deliver the meaningful transformation, the meaningful decommissioning, the cost out, effectively removing the complexity in the couple of years after that, your full business case is delivered by year 3, but there's growth coming in offsetting the costs within a year. And on top of all of that, the upfront CapEx much, much, much lower. If you're buying this as a pre-built managed service in the SaaS model, the cost, the usage only arrives when it delivers. And so your upfront investment risk is much lower. And that's the difference. You can experiment with this effectively. There's a fairly low cost way to get it implemented, demonstrate the growth there, demonstrate the system works locally in the market. And there's countless examples of years of program that don't deliver that. And then once you've proven the system's working in the market, you deliver the migrations in quite quick succession afterwards. It really changes the time scales of it, as well as the upfront economics. And that's suddenly a thing you can contemplate signing off yourself, but also that you can take your board on, even when you run stress scenarios on it. And it becomes a year 4, year 5 payback in stress scenarios. That's still a comprehensible risk and a budget that you could sign off.
One of the second order benefits that I've noticed from this far more rapid deployment of the technology is there's now a lot more conviction that I'm seeing with banking CEOs around actual product development. Hey, we actually now can do some things that are different, not the same old product that's existed, slightly faster, slightly cheaper. Are you seeing a similar thing? I think AMP is probably a good example where, Sean, when he was on the show, was talking about doing things. I was like, wow, all right. It's kind of encouraging to hear a banking CEO talk about new products that actually seem relevant to me in my life.
The big shift to me is that it's not just talking about products in bank lands, new term deposits, new rates for things, new pricing on loans, that kind of thing in the traditional sense. The product here is tools and solutions that solve problems for customers. That's the real shift in mindset in the last few years. Actually, a lot of what banks do are kind of services to people, to families, to business owners. And the product in that sense are systems that technology that make their lives easier, that help them better understand their money, manage their money, to get paid and to make payments and that kind of thing. And that's the shift that I'm really interested in, but also I think we've played a big part in making actually the business case isn't a crude financial business case of what's the revenue uplift on this or the cost out. This is actually what can it do for customers, because if you do something good for customers, that delivers growth, it lowers acquisition costs, it builds up the brand and the trust and the position in the market, and that delivers a real upside for the bank beyond the traditional way of looking products, which is just pricing, cost of capital, cost of risk.
I think what's also unique is because we're a managed service and we're used by Starling Bank and all of our customers use exactly the same software that's in the market. If you combine that with the fact that Engine is making releases of 40 to 60 per day at the speed of change. So you're not waiting for some sort of release documentation or to write business requirements. You're actually seeing working software and you're seeing how other customers are adapting that software. So you could be talking to SaltBank in Romania or Tangerine in Canada or Starling Bank in the UK and looking at how are they innovating with the same feature set that you're giving and then starting to take some inspiration from that and saying, well, I actually think that would be great for my customer, and feeding into that ecosystem. You're innovating in real time with working software at pace. You're not waiting to deliberate on a feature for 12 to 18 months. You can see this thing come to life really quickly in a matter of weeks.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned the AI. We're like 30 minutes in, right? Congratulations, but obviously, it's having a huge impact, and
it's on almost every standard.
And we've been around long enough to know all the buzzwords and then the hype and the hype cycles. This for me isn't a hype cycle. I think we're kind of very much at the beginning of way bigger change than I witnessed when I first came into recruitment, which was everybody all of a sudden getting a computer on their desk and the access to the internet. This is now, multiples of that. What are you finding from your customers as to what their expectations are? Is there still a lot of kind of hesitancy around adopting the technology?
We've all seen the shift in our personal lives. People have adopted it incredibly quickly, and the technology's come on leaps and bounds in that respect. There's two challenges for banks, actually. The biggest one is generally getting the data into the models. The fundamental knowledge processing capability isn't there, but these things are effective because of context. And if you're in a traditional back office with 7, 10, 20 different systems that people are swivel chairing between, the context is split, it's disparate. You cannot get it to a model. And the human is aggregating it from different screens. The agent can't do that effectively. And so unless you can get the full context into the model, the agents, the dream of a back office of a bank can't be realized. And that's really encouraging technology modernization at a pace we've not seen before. Because if your system can't produce events and can't extract data in real time and can't do that across a broad range of topics, from the customer's free text contact history and call logs through to internal complaints and financial crime and case management tools through to the actual banking, transactional, repayment history data, the models won't produce useful outputs for customers or for staff because they just won't know what's going on. So it's driving a big challenge for technology teams effectively of how do we accelerate modernization to be able to make use of those. The real challenge for banks is the governance control journey and getting used to manage this kind of change. So that first use case was internal, human in the loop, transcribing calls. So writing the call transcription, summarizing it into action points, getting a human to review that. It saves time, nice clear use case, but if the model makes a mistake, there's no risk of harm. The human managed the interaction. Getting it to customer-facing propositions took a lot more thought around the guardrails, financial advice, looking after people, that kind of thing. So the first use cases were, there's a thing called scam intelligence. So you take a photo of a thing you intend to make a payment for, be it a WhatsApp message from a family member asking for money, through to buying a PlayStation that looks too good to be true on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. And the AI will tell you whether there's risks that you're making a payment for a fraudulent reason. But the human input was just an image. The prompt came from us.
Yeah.
And so we knew it couldn't go off-piste. And so we could get our compliance, our control team is comfortable with that. That then evolved to spending intelligence starting to ask questions about your spending. It's now human customer entered prompts, but the data it has to process on the guardrails can be incredibly tight. It won't about anything else in the world. And we eventually got through to a full generic assistant that can take action on your bank account. As we got more comfortable with the guardrails and loosen them. But even there, it's designed to exit the AI at key moments. So the AI decides it wants to take an action on your behalf. We capture it at that point, effectively exit the AI state, and then it goes through some human authored compliance reviewed copy that explains in plain English what it's about to do, gives us a moment to check that we think that's appropriate, given everything we know about that relationship. The human can then consent to that action, and then we give the AI the freedom to go and make the API calls. The agent can go and carry out that action. This has been a very careful design journey to get the governance and the control environment right, because the ways banks are used to working don't apply in the AI age. You have a contract with us that says we'll give you 6 to 12 months deprecation notice when something changes or needs to be removed. The AI models get deprecated in a couple of weeks. If you don't have a change environment that can cope with 2 weeks from deprecation notice to being fully removed on your production estate, which for most banks would be incomprehensible. You can't adopt these tools. They're just fundamentally delivered and are evolving at a different pace to what we used to managing.
Mark, what's your take on, I guess, the mood, the sentiment towards AI from the community banking space? And do you see there's an opportunity there for them to be maybe pioneers rather than followers?
I mean, I think just in the same way that solutions like Engine and Cloud have provided a way for community banks to punch way above their weight in terms of competing with some of the majors, I think AI presents the same opportunity. But I think, as Sam alluded to, it's important that banks get their hygiene in order. The data governance, the data structure. I think technology simplification is key to then being able to then move into the AI journey with confidence. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity, and it's some of the use cases that we've already seen evolve out of Starling Bank, which is what Sam alluded to. Will just show there's some of the efficiency benefits and customer experience outcomes, especially around. I know there's a lot of focus around cyber and scam prevention. I think AI offers incredible value for the community banks to tap into. So I think if of all the stakeholders in our sort of finance space, I think community banks have the opportunity to actually reap the greatest potential. But doing, I think, that in partnership with other community banks and peers and with technology providers, so they make sure they do that in a very sort of risk-controlled way. But there's no doubt the speed of this sort of evolution is just going to start to accelerate. And I think now's a great opportunity for banks to get ready for that. One other thing I've observed is that it feels that community banks only see M&A as an option to survive, and this perception that bigger is better. I think what Starling Bank proved is that you can be small and profitable at the same time.
And with I guess, the customer numbers that they have as well, a lot of fintechs would dream of having 100,000, 200,000. With AI, we've talked a lot about the moat perhaps being distribution. And I think the great thing with fintech is there's an additional moat, which is the regulation piece as well. You talked before, Sam, about just the cost, right? The capital up front that you need to spend to build something like this. It's insane, right? And, it's not to be disrespectful to others, but if you're a couple of guys in a WeWork or in a unit in Bondi, dreaming that you're going to be.
It's hundreds of millions of pounds to build the technology you need ultimately. And whereas now with solutions like Engine, it's accessible even at the mutual or the community bank scale. Look what we're doing with SBS in New Zealand. It's a beautiful institution, a real strong center of that community, but not a large institution. But actually, Engine makes the transformation to a really modern platform a viable path for them, and something we can get done on a reasonable budget in a meaningful time frame to have the impact they're looking to for the community and for their members.
Brilliant. I mean, I think community banks, many businesses would envy not just the numbers, but the loyalty that they get from their customers. And I see digital as something that's going to amplify that relationship. I think in the past, people have seen it as a trade-off between having branches and presence within the community or going with digital and mobile. But in actual fact, what Starling Bank proved is the two actually come together and develop a much deeper relationship.
it's always been approached as a cost-saving exercise for the bank, whereas actually it's enabling and empowering customers, giving them the freedom to do what they want when they want. It doesn't need to be at the expense of the human interaction, the human-enabled contact centers, the branches there at the center of the community. It augments and enhances those and gives the staff, the employees of the bank, more time for customers rather than...
Yeah. You touched on something there that I think is really important and doesn't get talked about enough in the whole kind of technology conversation, which is actually the cultural element of it. Where I've seen it work really well is where you do have, that startup mentality, so like an engine Starling of, move fast and make things because we can't break them because we're heavily regulated. Yeah. But also that you've got this kind of joint values, joint kind of behavior set of being the real challengers, being super resourceful, having to get outcomes and results with very limited resources. How have you found that kind of startup mentality has helped you?
Probably more the alignment in purpose and values, as I think you were kind of getting to there. Starling exists to deliver better banking, deliver better outcomes for customers. It's a pioneering banking for enterprising people. And the community banks exist to serve their members, to serve their communities. And that's very different from a large PLC that is obligated to serve the interests of its shareholders. Yeah. And so I think that's where the real alignment comes from. These organizations come together and you realize they're trying to do the same things in the same way for the communities they serve. And most importantly, those communities, those people, families, business owners have the same needs and problems. It's been one of the most interesting bits for me on this journey with Engine. Leaving the UK, getting the chance to meet banks in a whole number of different markets and different regions. Fundamentally, their customers want the same things from their financial institutions. They have the same challenges and problems in life. And so the things we're coming up with in Britain to help them work in Australia, that the AMP come up with, SALS come up with in Romania, that Tangerine come up with in Canada, they're all serving the same segments of customers with the same needs and all having different ideas and approaches to do that. And we're building this community of like-minded banks that learn from each other's experience and benefit in that way as well. Yeah, we got them all together actually for the first time back in April. All came together for a couple of days, and it was a tiny bit of us talking, but mostly the banks talking to each other and showing the things they've done and the outcomes they had, and not just the things that went really well, but did you stick that in a press release and make the most of it? The real valuable lessons come from the things that didn't go as you'd expect, that you would be willing to talk about to the same extent in public, but in a closed room of like-minded banks, actually you can have a real openness to learn from each other. And the dynamic there was just beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it.
And I think what you're picking up on equally, I think a lot of providers out there that operate at one speed, and when they're selling to community, they're also operating at a different speed. For me, the real difference with Engine is that we had Starling Bank sitting in the middle. And so what Starling Bank brought to our customers is, how do you operationalize all of this change that's taking place? It keeps the integrity of Engine, because we need to think about that as everything we build goes straight into Starling Bank, goes straight into our customers. So we can't be too disconnected. It's the same managed service that we have to provide for all of our customers. So I think part of our value proposition is giving visibility to that Starling Bank operating model. How does Starling Bank ingest all this change? How does AMP ingest all this change? And letting other peers take that on board. Think about how they need to make changes internally so they can move at pace, not just with the technology coming down to them, but also the people and the operations can change at the same pace.
And from a talent perspective, what does it mean for the types of people that you look for? What are the qualities that you need in people? And what are some of maybe the qualities that haven't worked out quite as well as others?
Some interesting.
Because everybody's made that mistake, right? It's
what doesn't work out is egos. That's where things get difficult. People who are doing it for themselves, trying to take the credit, to make their own name. Feel that purposeful kind of outcome-focused institution. You need creative people that have a good range of knowledge, experience, background, but are also willing to offer opinions beyond their scope. None of us know the answer. There's rarely a perfect answer to be found. And so you're using a collection of different people's experience and judgments to go, okay, let's try that and see if it works. And you own that decision and you own that outcome as a group, as a team. I think that's when things are most effective. So you can't afford for the egos, but you need creative people that are willing to offer an opinion and stick their necks out, take a risk, make a suggestion, whether it's their area of expertise or not.
And what have you found, Mark? What are some of the things? Because you're building the team here in Oz. What are some of the things that you're looking for?
Well, I have to build on what Sam's saying because I agree with all of that. I mean, we ultimately are entering into deep partnerships. The success of Engine in our market is only going to be there if we're seeing the success of SBS and we're seeing the success of AMP. So, for me, I'm looking for people that are going to collaborate, get into the boat with our customers, with our partners, and be focused on how do we get to those outcomes and deliver those outcomes. So I think exactly what Sam mentioned is moving away from egos and just thinking about yourself and how you sort of control the remit of your responsibility or accountability, but actually starting to put yourself into the shoes of your customers, understanding what they need to get done, and sort of leading from that perspective.
Yeah. We're coming to a wrap. Before we do, I got to ask you both, what's got you excited about Australia right now?
You get first.
What am I excited about Australia? As I mentioned, I think we're at an unprecedented point in change. I think some of the technology that's now available to our community banks. I'm a big fan of community banks. I think we've seen in many markets that the more options that customers have, I think is the backbone of financial and growth for our country is providing customers with alternatives that they can go to, whether it's community banks or fintechs or the majors. So I'm passionate about bringing community banks the same technology that I think in the past has really been exclusive to our majors, and seeing some of the experiences that we're able to deliver through those partnerships that I think will bring much better outcomes for customers right across Australia.
It's a great point, because if I look back to 2018 when we had all the RADI licenses and the emergence of neobanks, the question that I had then is, hey, why do we need more banking licenses? We've got 110 or 120, I think, at the time. Is it not about making these banks more competitive? And I think the noise from the Royal Commission, as well as the government push, which was fantastic, and we all benefited from it. But I think to your point, the comparison that was made of what's happening in the UK with Starling, with Revolut, with Monzo, it wasn't really as relevant to Australia, because the big four banks were way ahead on the technology front because they'd done pretty well out of the whole GFC. So they were all profitable, so they were able to invest and double down on tech. So that opportunity for a neobank to come and compete perhaps wasn't there. And ultimately what perhaps we should have been doing was what you guys are doing now, right?
Level the playing field for the others ultimately. So, Australia has all the foundations you need, from modern real-time payment rails to a modern kind of forward-thinking, competition-encouraging regulator. You've got the foundational basis. There's no constraint that stops this happening. And that's what keeps it interesting. For even open banking, it hasn't worked out the way people think it has, but it's a much better implementation than we've seen in other markets, because the regulators studied the impact and what worked and what didn't elsewhere, and has learned lessons from that. And so I think it's got an environment that is well set up to enable change, to enable different outcomes for customers. It's now a case of the institutions here taking that leap and making some bold decisions, ultimately those difficult bets that executives have to. But that combined with the AI discussion we're having, I think we're at that point where there's no choice. We have to do that now.
Well, quite a few of those executives actually listen to the show. So if they are listening and they want to find out more about Engine by Starling, where's the best place for them to head?
Well, you can find my profile on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or enginebystarling.com, and you'll find our details there. We'd love to get in touch.
Awesome. We also get amazing talent listening to the show as well. If anybody's interested in finding out careers at Starling, where's the best place to head?
On the website, it's got our careers page. Sydney is our second biggest office now, so we've got quite a sizable team here, both client-facing teams and on the engineering side as well.
Right.
So it's a great city for talent and for living and working in as well.
Well, Sam, Mark, thank you so much for joining me and inviting me along to your beautiful stand this morning.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Appreciate the time.
As always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and X. If you're new to the show, make sure you follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a follow, a like, and a subscribe. And if you're coming back, thank you so much for your support. It really does help me in getting great guests along like Sam and Mark. Until the next episode, keep well.